What's up, everybody? I'm Sam Graham-Felsen.
I'm Avi Klein.
And you're listening to Hey Man, the advice podcast for men. This week on the show, we're really excited to have Ann Friedman. She's the co-host of the super popular podcast, Call Your Girlfriend, which is a show about female friendship. Hey Man is a show about male friendship. We thought we could learn from her, and we're
excited to share the results.
Part of what was inspiring to us about your show, and still is, you know, it's a show about friendship. We are friends in real life. Avi and I have been friends for over a decade. Your show and the book, which sort of brings up an important point that is like generally overlooked, I think, which is that like friendship is something that should be taken seriously and requires work. Like there's so much stuff about like how to make marriages work, you know, how to be a better parent. And I feel like there's almost nothing about how to be a better friend. So I think it's cool that you guys are kind of embarking on that. Can you talk a little bit about the book you guys are working on?
Yeah, of course. So the book is called Big Friendship. It will not be out until late spring or summer of 2020. So unfortunately, if you're listening to this pretty soon after it comes out, you're going to have to wait. But yeah, the book is really both a memoir of my friend and podcast co-host Aminatou Sow and my friendship. We've been friends for a decade. And it's also a look at more broadly, the role that friendship plays in our lives and our society, and how, despite the fact that we are always, I think people of all genders are really paying lip service to the importance of friendship, it is something that is often the first thing to go when other aspects of our lives become more time-consuming or complicated. And I think some of that is because of structures. You pointed out that there's a lot of advice for parenting or marriage. There's, as we know, tons of advice about your career. And that reflects the fact that I think people really understand that you need to work on and invest in those areas of your life if you want them to be fulfilling. Whereas, because friendship is this very unique relationship where all parties are there only because they want to be there. You know, there's no marriage contract. There's no, tacit obligation of caregiving that is there with other like family relationships. It is really just like show up if you want to show up is the attitude that I think a lot of us are raised with friendship. And while that's certainly fine, people are allowed to make their own choices about what relationships are important. I think we're arguing that the world would look a lot different if we took friendship relationships as seriously as we should. And as many of us feel about them, but don't really act on. And I think, we're aware that in a single book, we can't get at every type of friendship, every facet of friendship, every challenge that might crop up in a friendship. And so we're kind of using our own experience as the center or the jumping off point for a lot of these conversations. But what we're really hoping is that people can read the book and consider their own friendships and have more honest conversations with their friends and reinvest in them.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about on the show a lot is just basically how difficult our friendships are with other men. And in fact, one of our sort of another part of the origin story is that like every time me and Avi would hang out, and Avi is a psychotherapist who literally like talks about feelings for a living, but every time we would hang out, we would have to have like at least 2 or 3 beers and be like watching a sports game on
couldn't
TV.
Like look at each other.
We couldn't even make eye contact, right? And I think like issues have come up over and over about like when we feel hurt by our male friends, just like never really feeling like we're allowed to call them out, or, and basically like, both sort of being doormats in our friendships and also taking advantage of our friends and not being good enough friends to them. And, and it is funny how like friendship is this kind of like wild, wild west of relationships where it doesn't seem like there are many rules because, as you said, it's like the way that our society has set up expectations around friendship is you just kind of like show up when you feel like it, and if you stop feeling like it, like then you just kind of ghost on the other person. So.
And I was curious, one of the things I associate with your show so much that has been impactful for me, but also hard for me, whenever the two of you talk about shine theory, which feels like such a call your girlfriend trademark. I was not raised that way, and feel really competitive with people. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. Like whenever I listen to the two of you talk about it, it's like a balm for my soul to like let go of feeling like an asshole all the time.
Can you even explain shine
theory?
Theory?
Maybe can you I bet you could do a better job of summarizing shine theory than I can, but I feel like especially dudes would benefit from being open to this.
Yeah, so the term shine theory is another one of those things that's really rooted in my friendship with Aminatu. And for years, we would say to each other, I don't shine if you don't shine. And often that was a way of reassuring each other when one of us felt like we were asking a lot of the friendship, that it was not too much to ask, right? So if I spent, an hour revising her resume for her, or if she left work early because I had some medical thing crop up and she was going to like just be with me, or whatever point it felt like maybe this is an inconvenience to the other person and we might be feeling like we had overstepped some bound of friendship, we would say that. And I think it really, it evolved from there into like a bigger theory, hence the name, about the power of really investing in your close community of people in the same way you invest in yourself. And so the idea is not like you never compete with anyone for anything. And the idea is not, becoming a doormat and giving yourself fully to everyone in your world. But it's just this idea that like maybe if we would work together in a more concerted way and prioritize collaboration over competition, we would actually all get a lot further. And I think that this idea for us has been rooted in particular in our experience as women, because I think many women are trained to compete with other women in spaces where they have traditionally been underrepresented. There's sort of that idea of like, I'm a cool girl, I'm the one girl who can hang with the guys. Like, there's kind of that cultural idea. But overall, like we live in a capitalist society, which, I think most people like you are raised to believe that everyone is a potential competitor for the short list of things that you want to get out of life. And really at its core, shine theory is challenging that idea and saying like, does this person really want exactly what you want? And is it mutually exclusive that you could both get where you want to go? And that doesn't mean you never feel jealous. I had like a real spike of professional jealousy feeling very recently that I think is that is a feeling. It's not an action. And shine theory is a practice of sort of saying like, okay, so instead of acting on that feeling by maybe tearing down this person I feel jealous of, I'm going to send them an email and be like, wow, your work has really blown me away. Could I ask you about how you did this aspect of it? Or, something that feels more productive.
I love that reframe.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And so anyway, so that's what I mean. It doesn't mean you'll never feel jealous again or you won't feel competitive again. I think that's an important thing. It's really what you do with that feeling.
So I have a specific sort of embarrassing jealousy situation that I want to ask you how I can apply shine theory to it that came up today. This sounds like so lame. It's so embarrassing to admit it, but every year Barack Obama releases his reading list of his favorite books. And I have sent him like 4 copies of my book, and I worked for him.
One for every member of the family.
Yes. I definitely sent like 4 copies to Michelle as well. And my book came out like a year and a half ago. So at this point I've sort of given up, but every time his list comes out, his winter reading and his summer reading list, and I'm not on it, I get re-triggered by like massive jealousy of all the people who are on the list, especially because I'm like, I used to be Barack Obama's blogger. Like how is he not giving me any love? So I was able to catch myself when I was feeling that way this morning. And, I was with both of my kids. I was like, you know what, you got to snap out of this and be present with your kids right now. Don't be like all gloomy. I like opened the fridge and saw a giant tall can of IPA and I'm like, man, it would be nice to hit that right now. But like, how long am I allowed to like experience the bitterness before I sort of transition into like channeling it in a productive way? That's what I was trying to figure out. Cause it does seem like what's the line between just like repressing that jealousy versus like feeling it and then channeling it into something, not ruinous to society and yourself.
Well, I mean, this is going to sound so eye roll, but for me, often that real spike of jealousy feeling is a teacher. I mean, thinking about, okay, so why did you want to be on Obama's list? Like, let me just ask you a few more questions. Like, what would that have represented to you, or like what would happen after you were on the list?
You're asking me literally, or is this
I'm asking you literally.
Sam,
Yeah.
Sam's
okay.
sitting on my therapy couch right now, so I feel like this is totally okay.
Honestly, my real, I actually went there right away and I was like, why do I want to be on his list so bad? And, the quick surface level reason is I wanted Barack Obama's approval. Then I thought about it more and I'm like, I think like Barack Obama is like some stand-in for my father. And like, I really want my parents' approval. I don't know. Like I went to that place and it even asking those questions made the burden a tiny bit lighter. But yeah, I mean, I wanted his, I wanted him to think that I was a good writer. I mean, I wanted that confirmation because sometimes I believe I'm a good writer and then sometimes I'm not sure. And I want a famous, only the most famous person in the whole world to tell me that I am.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so I think that is like an interesting, like, for me then, I mean, I don't know. All advice is really just you talking about yourself. So, I mean,
Right.
I'm just going to talk about myself now that I hear you say that, which is, I feel that feeling a lot when I experience it less in terms of who made what list, but I often experience it when I read a book that I think is really incredible or an essay about an idea that I have maybe thought I should try to write about that, but haven't really found my way into it or haven't gotten around to it. Like often I have that feeling of insecurity. And when I dig into it, I think like, well, what are you really doing? Like, are you trying, this person put in the work and explored that idea, or this person is, has been working for 10 years longer than you, or this person has a perspective that you don't have. And that is what has really elevated this piece of writing. I mean, I try to sort of put on my editor brain sometimes when I have specific anxieties related to writing. And the best thing about identifying as a writer is it is a cheap passion. Like it is the kind of thing that like, I know your time is not cheap and neither is mine, but like you can really sit down and words, it's not like, trying to level up in some sort of gear-based sport or something, right. Like you can really sit down and be like, let me pick apart what is great about these other things. And when it comes to like the approval of specific people, I'll just tell you that like I'm reading Gia Tolentino's new essay collection.
I'm so jealous
incredible.
of how good of a writer she is. She's so good.
Yeah, and it's not even that. I mean, I am, sort of within myself thinking about, like what can I learn from, this really great piece of writing that I'm reading of hers. But also, I had that feeling when I looked at the back cover of her book and the blurbs were from every essayist who I've respected in the last two decades, which, I mean, and that feels much more akin to your Obama situation, right? Of like people who I really respect, whose approval I would want for myself, approve of someone else. and to that I say, I'm just like, I don't know. Like this feels like it kind of goes back for me to, what I can and can't control. Like I can control how much time I spend writing. I can control like, my relationship with Gia directly, which is a distant internet connection, but a friendly one. And I can, If I ever wanted to, I could ask her how she got her book into the hands of all these essayists I love. I could ask her to introduce me to one of these essayists I love, and who knows, maybe they would meet me for a coffee sometime. I could.
This is so reasonable.
I could think about. I mean, it took me. Listen, this was not my immediate gut reaction, but and I think that this idea too of like, okay, there are books on Obama's list that are not your book, and I think it's worth asking the question as well of like, is it really about your writing ability per se? I mean, sometimes those lists are put together based on this is an issue that's happening in the news right now, and this book provides context, or this is a perspective that really hasn't been heard, and those are things that you can't control, like when your book hits the news cycle. You can't control like what set of personal attributes or experience you necessarily bring to a piece of writing. And so you just have to realize that like that, the list is not a power ranking of people Obama thinks are best writers. I'm almost certain.
So let's dive into the advice question, because I think it's very much a what you can control versus what you can't control kind of issue.
Yeah, I think you're gonna bring a lot to this one. So I'm gonna read it, and then we just go over our impressions of it. Hey man, I'm 40 and recently divorced. Obviously, there's a lot there to deal with, but one of the things that I've really been stunned to realize since I've moved out on my own is that I don't have any friends. I didn't realize that I'd come to rely so much on my wife as a source of friendship. We had social, casual friendships with other parents, but it's only now, without my ex, that I realize I've been without real friendships for the better part of a decade. And now that I'm single again, I feel like a pariah. Couples don't really want to have me over as a single person, or maybe it just feels awkward for me. And I'm missing friends that are truly mine and know me well. I'm so busy with work and childcare as a solo parent now, I don't even know how to make new friends. Any advice? Signed, Lonely on the Lower East Side.
Yeah, my heart goes out to this man.
Yeah. I know.
I really had a very emotional reaction to that. Like, I really feel some sadness and compassion. It is not just... a reality that I think men are socialized to invest less in their friendships than in their romantic relationships. But it's also a reality that divorce in particular is one of those things that completely reconfigures your social world. And so I think that there's bigger things at play than just, the regrets of one man or the experience of one person,
Totally. I know someone who had a problem like this and really relied on dating apps to make friends with women. Like he couldn't find a way to make friends with other guys, which felt really sad to me too, that it was only like with a romantic introduction that he could find his way towards any kind of friendship.
I mean, I'll just speak for myself. Like, I used to feel like I had the problem that I had too many friends, and I didn't have enough time to work on my novel because all these fucking friends calling me up, knocking on my door, texting me, go away. And now I feel like I actually have the opposite problem. I feel like a lot of my friends have both Avi and I live in New York. As you know, it's expensive as shit here. So like most of my friends have been moving out, moving smartly to LA as you have, and other places. And so
listen, I've been here a decade. Okay. Like all these
New
York is emptying its bowels into my city. I'm like, you guys really want to be here? Like,
don't go to LA, everyone. Go to Austin. Don't jack up Ann's real estate prices. But anyway, but I now feel like I actually don't have that many friends, and the friends I still have, the people that I do want to call, are often like super busy professionals, and I feel like I'm going to be nagging them. So I have started to actually want, for the first time in a super long time, to make friends. And it's this funny thing. I like there are a few places where maybe I could make friends, like this meditation class that I go to where I see the same people over and over again, my exercise class that I go to where I see the same people over and over again. But there's this weird thing for dudes, and I wonder if, how it feels, for you, Ann, if you've tried to make a new friend anytime recently, or for other of your female friends. But like, I feel like there's this general anxiety, like, even though there are some guys that I vibe with, it's a really awkward interaction to like ask for their email.
Dating. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because like if somebody asked me to like hang out, Well, I don't know how I would react. I might feel weird about it because it's
I'd be
so
flattered.
unusual. I think I would be flattered, and I would want it. But I don't know. I'm just like so scared. There's always this underlying thing with men that like you're worried like the other guy is going to judge you as like being too soft or maybe even being gay. You know?
I don't know. What,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like this is a real like this is for like even for men who I think would be totally comfortable like wearing something that might be coded as gay or like having a mannerism that might be coded as gay. Like that's one thing. But
Can't
like
believe friendship is gay.
well,
we lost that
it's
too.
not, but awkward new friendship, I think, you know, for the exact reason that you say, it feels like dating. Like you are you know, essentially saying that something about the other person is attractive to you. And I don't even mean that in a sexual way, but you're like, listen, we have been in this meditation class for a while and there's something about you that makes me think that we would be good friends. That is attraction. And feeling hesitant to express that is something that most men in, you know, I mean, Western American culture have been socialized to feel like that is a
you're
feeling
literally
you only act on with someone you're sexually attracted to.
Totally. Because you are, if you're asking somebody on a friend date, I mean, you are literally, you're not literally, I misused that word, but you are effectively saying, I like you.
Yeah.
Right?
You are.
You are.
Do you, so, have you made a new friend recently or like, do you have any budding friendships?
So I would say my most recent close friend, she and I would say she largely initiated the friendship. We met through a mutual friend. She is also a writer. She's a gay woman. She lives pretty close to me in Los Angeles. And our first few like friend hangs, friend dates, whatever, she initiated on the basis of like talking about writing. Like this is like a thing she knew we both had in common. And it's funny, I haven't actually explicitly rewound this with her ever. And it is true that like the first couple times we got together, it felt like a really somewhere between an awkward first date and like an awkward, like professional, let's meet for coffee. But she is also someone who's very good. And I think that this is a skill set that I think is often associated with men making friends. She's very good at sort of saying like, okay, let's find the thing that we do together. So like our thing for a while was that we would go to movies together or like that. I don't see a lot of movies, but like it would just became a habit. If I wanted to see a movie, she was a person I would ask about it because she kind of proposed that as a thing we do. And then now we go to this monthly comedy night together. Like that's just a thing we do. And we are friends now beyond the scheduled kind of recurring activities. But I think she was really good about saying like, oh, we kind of need training wheels, right? To go from we just have a mutual friend and we might get along as friends ourselves to we can stand on our own 2 feet and just like meet at a Mexican restaurant and have chips and talk or whatever. We have to have a middle step. And that is something that's more structured. And I think, you know, you want to see a movie is probably too dating coded as to feel comfortable for a lot of people. But saying like, oh, I'm going to this event that is outside the bounds of what we normally do. I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of meditation event. Who knows?
Well,
whatever.
I was thinking,
You know,
that would totally work in
Let's
the
sit
context.
next to each other and not talk for 45 minutes.
And then maybe go for a drink after or go for
Yeah.
dessert after and talk, you know, like let's split a slice of cake, Lady and the Tramp, you know, and like, no, I'm kidding.
Okay, so that would
but
work
yeah.
for like a soft dude like me who goes to meditation classes. What about like, I'm just trying to imagine, what other kinds of,
You can do anything.
like in a practical way. What do you mean? I mean,
you could actually go to one of the cool things that's in the New Yorker that like you always look in the beginning and not do. You could go.
no, I know you can.
Yeah.
I know you can
do?
go on.
Yeah.
You could do any kind of activity with this male friend that you want to reach out to. But like, how do you even like make the? I mean, I guess there's two steps. One, how do you even meet new people that you might like? And I guess, the answer to that in a city is, or anywhere really, is to like, you have to go to like, I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Ann? How do you even meet people to begin with? Because that's I think the first step that we kind of skipped over.
Like, yeah, Like,
Well, I think when you're new, we actually have an episode of Call Your Girlfriend that might be relevant to this. It's about being new in town, but I think that a lot of it applies to being in a new phase of life or being maybe newly single or something like that. And some of it just involves doing way more. And I think this is another reason why I have compassion for your letter writer who is spending a lot of time parenting. But I think when I think about times I've been new in town, like when I moved to Los Angeles, I had two tenuous friend connections, and I really made an effort to see them, like to nail them down, to make plans, to sort of say like, okay, when we're hanging out, make our next concrete plan to hang out. And one of those friends is now one of my very best friends here. I've seen her twice a week for 8 years or whatever it's been. And then the other thing is to not decline any invitation. And so sometimes, it is really hard to get up the courage to go to a barbecue where you only know the host, or to go to someone's big like birthday thing, or go to some kid's birthday party where you're just like, oh my God, like my kids know one person here and I don't know anyone, or whatever. And I think that those are the kinds of things that if you are in a period where you're acknowledging that you want to meet new friends, you just have to say yes to as many of those things as you can possibly squeeze into your life. Like it has to be a priority to be in spaces where you're going to physically have to bump into people and make conversation with them.
I think that's a great point. And that, like, I truly cringed as you were like describing being invited to a barbecue where you only know the host. Cause like just that experience is so hard for, I mean, and I'm consider myself a on the spectrum, a pretty socially comfortable person, but I hate that feeling of like sidling up to the guy at the grill and like, cause you're afraid to go, shake hands and meet anyone else who you don't know. But one thing that, has just struck me as you're talking about, getting yourself into these situations is I feel like we just can't underestimate how powerful genuine friendliness is. And like, if you are approaching somebody in good faith as a friendly person, like most people aren't dicks who are just going to like blow you off and not engage you in a conversation, And I think like in periods of my life where I have been, in a new city, and somebody who only knows one person at the barbecue, I just assume nobody would want to talk to me because any social interaction is like a waste of somebody's time if they're not already your close friend. And, the times I forced myself to just be friendly, like it's just immediately disarming.
I also just want to, Sam and I joke a lot about, even though we don't want to give advice, we always go into like, well, what do you do? Which also feels like a very dude thing to do. And there's another.
We always claim that we're not
not going to give people advice, and then we do all just.
We claim we're going to do what you did, and which is just to like have compassion. But we always want to.
We want to get away from that as quickly as possible. But there's one thing that I don't know if this resonates with either of you, but I felt it when I read this question, which is something that I think has gotten in the way of me making friends now as an older adult. Is I really miss my friendships from when I was younger. And it's almost like I can't let them go, even though they're not in my life in the same way. It's like, there's a part of me, it's like, I'm never going to have that again. And that somehow that gets in my way a lot. Like the frustration of this awkwardness that we're describing. I don't want to go through that. I had really deep, meaningful friendships when I was younger, and now I don't have them. And sometimes that really gets in my way. I don't know if that resonates for either of you.
Well, there is a truth to the fact that you have to put in a certain number of hours with someone in order to feel close to them. Like that's just true in any kind of relationship. And when you're younger, it's a lot easier to clock those hours because you have a lot more time. And I think for me, it has definitely taken me longer to get closer to the people I've become close with in like my 30s, for example, than it was. In my 20s or when I was in college. So I think that that's just a factor of understanding that the time frame, even if you're seeing someone for the 15th time, which like, oh my gosh, like it, if for a new friend in your 30s, if you're hanging out for the 15th time, you are like clasping your hands above your head on like the victory platform. You're like, oh my God, we both made so much time for each other. But, you know, in terms of cumulative hours, that isn't anywhere close to like we shared a dorm room or whatever, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that really, if you're lucky, life is long, and thinking about the long-term payoff of a friend that you make now is a real motive. I mean, like I'm a real long gamer in almost every area of my life, so this is maybe easier for me than for some personality types. But I will also say this is that when I hear that question from your listener, I also think about many men who I know and care about who are in romantic relationships, particularly with women, and they are also dissatisfied with the state of their friendships, be they with men or women, basically anyone who isn't their spouse. And I would say that like all the advice that we're giving right now, or that, you know, all of this contextual conversation and compassion right now that we are giving to this recently divorced guy who wants more friends, should apply equally to anyone who is in a marriage or romantic relationship who feels like their friendship side of the equation is anemic. You know, like maybe take a look at that, not because you're planning to get divorced someday, but because like a healthy adult life involves healthy friendships too.
Yeah, I was going to say that I just want to applaud this guy for at least realizing that he needs friendships, because sometimes when I'm like in a bad place in life, I just go to the place of like, I just want to be alone. And of course I always actually go to that place. My instinct, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this. I think a lot of dudes go to the, like, I must be like a stoic monk in a cave handling my pain alone, rather than making friends or reaching out to old friends. And I think, like, you know, and also, like, you know, something that went unspoken in your last comment, Ann, but most marriages are difficult and you know, are challenging, and it's useful to have friends that you can like talk through some of the stuff that's going on in your marriage with someone else, you know? So I'm glad that he at least isn't going to the like hermit approach of like, I'm just going to, like, you know, stew in my own pain. He's doing, you know, the right thing by, you know, at least recognizing that he needs to go make friends. So, all right. So let's try to wrap up what our concrete advice is. He should
listen to that episode of Call Your Girlfriend.
He should say yes to invitations, which again is an easy one to dismiss, but it's an important piece of advice, and I think one that a lot of people just instinctually are like, I don't want to make the effort to go to that barbecue because I'm going to be the only one.
Suck, yeah.
What are some of the other concrete things that this guy can do?
Well, I would add to the show up advice. Show up and promise yourself you're going to talk to 3 people you don't know, or something like that. Like, really, I know that sounds very like reductive and concrete, but not just show up, but like show up and make an effort, I think is really is important. And
what about just the question of the awkwardness of a man worrying that like the other guy is going to think he's weird? Like,
who cares? Like, what's the worst thing that happens? Someone thinks you're gay? Like, now, I mean, okay. Like, I don't know. How else are you going to make friends anymore?
Exactly. And I actually think that the person who's going to be a good fit for you in friendship is probably someone who, frankly, is looking to make some friends too, even if they are not recently divorced or whatever. And so that person is going to be, you know, right, for maybe 5 people are going to think that you are weak and weird or like needy or whatever negative thing you've got in a loop on your head that makes you not want to approach people. But for every 5, maybe there's one who's like, oh my God, I also want to make a friend here. Yeah. And like, they've been waiting for someone else to be proactive, because everyone's always waiting for someone else to be proactive. So yeah, I think that like that, getting over that fear-based thing that we often talk about with regard to dating is also applicable in the kind of making friends, talk to strangers context.
Totally. So Ann, we like to wrap up the show by asking each guest to share just a nugget of advice that has stuck with you for a while that you continually come back to. Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Well, one thing that I read a lot, and I also send to friends who are going through something difficult, is this passage from Octavia Butler's novel Parable of the Sower, which is like a dystopian sci-fi kind of book that the plot of which is not relevant, but it's about change, and it goes like this: all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And I'm like, when I think about like when I am struggling with something, there's a very high probability that it is because I am not really rolling with a change that is happening that is outside my control. And I don't know, I really come down to that a lot of like, yes, like you are an agent, like all that you touch, you change. But also change is just a fact of life. And I think especially for people socialized as men, thinking about being someone who is comfortable with change or actively welcoming of change is like, can be even harder. And I just want to put in a plug for change as like advice and comfort.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, the thing you're making me think of is like surrendering to change a bit, letting it happen, which feels really
letting
hard.
it happen, not being afraid to enact it, like not being afraid to change in response to change, recognizing that nothing is ever static is like, you know, I'm sure there is some other like advicey way to put that, but I actually feel like stating the fact and really, really taking that fact to heart is one of the most helpful lessons of my adult life.
Yeah, and I think it is particularly useful for men to hear this because we have been socialized through the patriarchy to be the guys who control shit.
Yeah,
and for most of human history, women have been controlled by men, right? So like we are socialized to be obsessed with having a permanent hold on something. Anyway, that's really helpful and useful, and just generally your wisdom about friendship has been awesome. So we really appreciate you joining us, and we're looking forward to reading your book and psyched to continue listening to Call Your Girlfriend.
I'm so excited to hear your thoughts on the book if and when you read it, because we are really hoping that that men will find a lot in the book as well.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
Cool. Thanks,
Awesome.
Sam.
Thank you.
That's a wrap, everybody. As always, you can email us with your advice questions at heymanpod@gmail.com. Better yet, shoot us a voicemail, 917-426-4326. If you want to get your Instagram or Twitter on, we're at heymanpod. And as always, we really appreciate if you would give us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. It makes a big difference for us.